Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
All right, I get to go first. Tanya Smith, and I am the founder of Get Noticed with Video LLC. I also host a weekly live stream show that is converted into a video podcast. It's called Stream Like a Boss TV. So excited to be here with these legends. I'm the newbie and the girl on the block, apparently. That means I'm the best, but anyway. All right, I'm going to pass it on to Lou, but let me just say this. One of the things that I absolutely love about live streaming is that it gives you the ability to really be able to convert your content quickly into many other formats, including video podcasting. And so grateful to be here to talk about that in addition to anything else that we're covering.
My name is Lou Mongello. I am a recovering attorney who more than 20 years ago left the practice of law to share my passion for all things Disney. I've been podcasting since 2005, been doing weekly live video since 2007, and I also love helping other people turn what they love into what they do. And alongside the person next to me, I am a very grateful recipient to be recently admitted into the Podcast Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm Dave Jackson. I am the head of podcasting at podpage.com. I also run the school of podcasting.com. Been doing it for 20 years like this guy and this guy. And I also am in the Podcaster Hall of Fame. And next to me is the one and only Jeff.
And I am not in the Podcaster Hall of Fame at all. But I have a show on Fridays called Creator News Live where I interview people in the creator economy. Been doing that for over 4 years, and I've been podcasting for a long time in front of that. But I also do a live show that I convert into a video podcast. And I mostly do interviews as well. So we're going to start with Tanya just kind of right off the gun because I want to get as many questions as we can. So Tanya, your work blends the live streaming with AI. You've been doing a lot of smart AI workflows. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you incorporate AI into your interview process?
So one of the things that's important to me is to make sure that we keep people over process, people over everything, right? So initially it's not about the AI itself, but what I do is I actually make sure that I provide some type of orientation process, right, for my guest so that they feel comfortable and confident about what's to come. When they're completing the application process or the registration process, I'm collecting information that I'm then taking and converting into a custom GPT that I built that actually researches them so that I can personalize the questions that we're going to be asking and not just ask them generic questions. And that way they feel more confident about what they're going to be talking about. It makes a better connection with the audience because it's really about them and it's not generic. It really is conversational.
So a little follow-up on that. Do you use AI to actually, like you mentioned, research your guests? Like, is it you're using your custom GPT to do that?
I use the custom GPT to do that and also to create an interview guide that I then provide to the guests to make sure that they're comfortable with, hey, here's the questions, this is the bio, this is what we're going to talk about. But in addition to that, it's also, again, about the people conversation, so having a little coffee chat with them so that they get to know who I am. They know what my audience is looking for because it has to be a good fit. And then ensuring that they just have all the preparation that they need in advance. So I even have a little video clip for them where I'm sharing with them, here's what to expect. You've been on my show before, Jeff, so you know.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been starting to use AI for is actually using the deep research feature for my guests. So I go in, and one of the things is I go and tell it to go look at, a lot of them have YouTube channels already, or they've been on other podcasts, and I can have it read the transcript, and I have them list all the questions, and then I say, I want to ask questions that are different than what they've been asking before. And I've had multiple guests say, I've never had that question asked of me before, which is what you want as an interviewer. So.
Yes.
Lou, you've built a lot of long-form relationships, interviews. You've been having leaders like Disney Experience Chairman Josh D'Amaro at D23. So what is your playbook for earning trust with these like high stakes guests? Like, you have one interview. If you screw it up, you'll probably never talk to them again, right? So how do you prepare for that? What are some of your tips for getting and landing those high profile interviews?
So I think you have to establish a legacy of trust, not just with your audience, but with a potential interviewee. So they know before they even come in, Disney knows that if somebody's going to come on my show, that they can trust sort of the types of questions that I'm going to ask. As a recovering trial attorney, it's all about the journey and it's about the research. So I know the journey I want to take, not just the guest on, but that I want to take the audience on. And as a trial attorney, I almost sort of know the answers to the questions before I ask them, which I think is very important. Do the bleeping work. Put in the work, do the research, so you can ask the questions that have not been asked before. The best thing the best reward you can get is somebody saying, "Wow, I've never been asked that before. Right. Wow, that's a great question." So putting in the prep time, doing the work, knowing that story that you want to tell, but you also have to listen more than you speak, which as podcasters for us is difficult. Listen to the answer that you get and don't necessarily follow your list of 10 questions. Go on that tangential journey, because sometimes I hear all the time, podcasters will leave gold on the table because they get an answer that is inviting them to tell another story, and they don't necessarily go down that road that you can certainly come back to later on.
So follow up on that, because we've had talks before, like I prepare questions before, that's just the way I've always done it. You don't. Do you have outlines that you already have prepared that you want to direct that, and you kind of reference that as you go, but you don't have specific questions you're going to ask?
I don't, and I've never sent a guest, and I never will. I'll never send a guest questions, and with all due respect to those who send them to me, I don't read the questions when I get them.
It's true.
Not because I'm lazy. Jeff knows I don't. Because I want my answer, and I want their answers to be genuine and authentic and unscripted. Because if you get them or give them ahead of time, what are they doing? They're thinking about it, and they're overthinking it, and their answer becomes, I feel, almost scripted, and you don't want that. You want it to be an organic, off-the-cuff response.
Because some people will write out questions, and you can see them reading it, like if you send them questions. Yeah, good point. Dave, you have coached thousands of podcasters and spent years teaching interviews and how to do good interviews. So what are the top 3 reasons interviews fall flat?
They didn't do the work. And what I do is I always leave myself a safety net. Because once you start a podcast, you're going to get a million, really bad pitches in your inbox. And when I get one that I'm like, first of all, if it's not a hell yeah, you're not coming on my show. But if I get one I'm like, it's kind of a heck yeah, I will say to them, I go, hey, as I don't know you, let's do a pre-interview. And just up front, even if we do the interview, in the event that I feel you don't deliver value to my audience, it's just not a good fit, I reserve the right to not publish our interview. And I've only had one person ever say, how dare you? Don't you know who I am? And so
Jeff C.
It kind of is look, you have to be confident that you're going to deliver value, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Mm-hmm. And I've had one time when I had a guy that I was like, we did a pre-interview, and then when we did the interview, he's like, oh no, let's talk about my story. And in my head, I'm thinking, to my audience, you're a stranger. Mm-hmm. And his solution for everything was, my dad was great. Well, my audience can't be adopted by your dad. And I just told him, I said, hey, we can either do the interview again and kind of do what we did in the pre-interview, or I'm not going to publish this. At which point he then pitched me so hard to be he wanted to coach me. He didn't really want to deliver value to my audience. So do the work. And like Lou said, I like it when I know the answer, and then I'm just kind of directing them through their greatest hits. And then like Jeff said, if you can get somebody to say, oh, I've never been asked that before. And also, I just interviewed Justin Moore, who has a great book called Sponsor Magnet. Mm-hmm. And I listened to all these interviews, and I went, you know what? I'm not going to ask a different question, because my audience hasn't heard Justin's greatest hits. And so I asked him all this. I even told him ahead of time, I'm like, dude, I'm just going to make you jump through the same old hoops. I go, I apologize for that, but that's what my audience wants to hear. And so when I shared it with him, I said, look, again, this is the same old interview. So if you don't want to share it, that's fine. But here's the graphic, here's the link in case you want to. But I have my expectations that, hey, this is for my audience, not so much for, growth. So
Jeff, can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah.
I think you also have to prepare an interview with the outcome in mind, right? Not just sort of, I want to get through my list of questions, but what is the value exchange for the person? Why should somebody listen? What are they going to get as a result of listening?
Yeah. And then just because Lou doesn't have questions, I write down topics, and they're here on my left-hand side. I have a pen that does not click with a pad in front of me, and when they say something like, I knew I had to do something to stand out, I write down on my pad, stand out, and then I go back to listening. Because otherwise you're trying to remember what they say. Okay, I got to remember stand out, and then they say something else, and you're like, oh, stand out and the favorite tool they have, and you're trying to remember all this while you're still listening. So I write it down so I don't have to remember it, and then once they get done, it's either do I have a follow-up question or am I going back to the original thing that I have there.
So one hack you can use too is I use Ecamm, and I'm sure the other ones do as well, but on my Stream Deck, if somebody says something, I can just hit a button and it marks the file. So I know that was a good one that I want to go back and either repurpose, and that's what I want to talk to you, Tanya, about, because I know you really talk about repurposing with purpose. So I want, and Lou talked about thinking about the end goal, like what you want it to be at the end. So as you're going along, preparing for the interview, how do you think ahead to like your repurposing strategy when you're finished with that interview?
So the first thing is, and this is whether I'm doing solo interviews, which I've done a lot more of, or not solo interviews, but solo podcasting. Solo or guest, you really need to think about the structure of what your podcast is going to look like. Like, what is the structure so that I can easily then segment things, right? So to give you an example, one of the things that I do from structure standpoint is I make sure that I have all my engagement. Since this is live streaming, we're doing the engagement stuff at the very beginning, so that's easy to cut off for the replay, for the repurposing. In addition, towards the end, and I'm just really shortcutting this, at the end, I'm going to have that 30-second reel, like a recap of whatever it is we talked about, some of the key points. And if it's a guest that I have, then I'm also going to make sure that they have some sound bites that are ready to go, which is part of that interview guide, the prep. Right, making sure that they know, hey, you want to have some sound bites ready. There's a couple of things I want you to be prepared for, because afterwards, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload that video clip into a tool called Cast Magic, but you really can do any other type of LLMs if you're using ChatGPT or something else. But I use Cast Magic to quickly go through, because I've got pre-ready prompts that basically are looking for key themes from the conversation, really great quotes from the conversation, and also ways to not only clip it into video clips, but also into social media bites that maybe I want to put together in a text, or image-based post, right? Additionally, I upload that same clip into Opus Clip and give it a prompt under the advanced settings, if any of you know what Opus is, but give it a specific prompt that says, I want you to look for the gold nuggets out of this conversation, like pull, 3 to 5 gold nuggets. And those are the ones that I'm going to be using for the repurposing, because I want to make sure that we're extending the conversation beyond just us talking right then. Mm-hmm. It's a conversation that's continuing to take place because we're sending that person's information all over after the show. Right, and also giving them the ability to be able to promote themselves by sharing those assets.
So one of the things that I kind of do the same thing into script, because you can go in and say, hey, I want you to find good clips. And I always say, but don't put me in it.
Yes.
Like I say, don't put Jeff C in it, because I want my guest to be the star of whatever clip. Mm-hmm. And my face is on it for a little bit or whatever for the repurpose thing. But the thing is that's what that grows my audience. Mm-hmm. And they also let me get better guests because they know I'm going to clip them out, and they've seen me do it on my channels for everybody else.
And one other thing about that, with Ecamm, and I know, again, a lot of people use Ecamm Live, but one of the things that's really particular about that, or that I love, is the isolated clips.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you're recording, not only is it capturing the pretty graphics and all of that stuff, but it's also getting the isolated videos of each of us. So me, which doesn't really matter with the guest interview so much, like you said, but definitely showcasing and highlighting my guest so that I can then take that's what I'm uploading into Opus Clips. So it's pulling them and their information, what they're saying, because you're right, it's about them and your audience.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, Lou, your audience, and you've built it up over 20 years, they always expect good stories. Like, even in your interview, there's a storytelling aspect to it, and Disney's famous for that. So how do you design an interview arc that feels and has like the setup, immersion, payoff without feeling forced, like a formula? You're not like, you don't do the same thing every episode and people can follow along because it's so used to. I mean, you keep extemporaneous enough that it doesn't feel like it. But how do you create that arc of storytelling through your interview process?
Well, I think it goes in again with knowing what my intent is from the outset, right? What do I want to deliver? Or what do I want that value exchange to be in exchange for somebody's time? So I'm going to start, with the origin story, right? We want to set the groundwork, set the framework. So contextually, maybe if it's not somebody whose name they know, like a Kevin Feige or a Julie Andrews, you want to sort of set the stage for who this person is and then take them on that storytelling journey. But I always sort of have that end goal in mind. And even if I have to abbreviate the interview for time or a story goes long, I know that I can skip other things that I was planning to talk about in order to get them to that ultimate goal.
So a follow-up question to that. So you don't just do interviews with famous Disney people. You're also out in the parks. You're doing food reviews. You're bringing in people who have gone on like a cruise that you've been on for Disney Cruise Line. How often do you try to space those different types of shows into your catalog of podcasting? Because there's a lot of interviews, but then there's also, hey, we're at a restaurant with my friends. We're doing this new thing that's out at Disney. So are you being very specific on how often you do those different types of interviews, or is it just kind of come what may?
Jeff, one would think that after 20 years, I plan out I get this question all the time. I'm like, how many weeks in advance do you plan your show at? I'm like, weeks. I'm like, it's Sunday night. I need to figure out what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, which is, you laugh, but it's somewhat true because I do a show that I would want to listen to and hope that there are other people that enjoy it. So the topics that I choose are not necessarily thought out in advance. They are either things that are timely, are interesting, or, again, I also try and have a wide spectrum of different types of topics, but it's sort of just what feels right in the moment. And to your point, it literally took me 20 years before I did a solo show. I've never done a solo episode until, what happens, guests cancel, they have to reschedule, and start doing solo shows, even though I've done my live show for 17 plus years. But I think it's also, to your point, like the podcasting is the heart of what I do, and community is the soul. It's what I talked about on Monday. I don't know what day it is. It's what I talked about here on Monday. And look to your community, and not just for ideas of what they want to hear or who they want to hear from, but sometimes your best interviewee is sitting right in front of you because they have a great idea. They have something that is a level of expertise, and it also fosters a greater sense of community because you're reaching into them so that they can be part of what it is that you're producing.
Awesome. So Dave, you have, I'm part of the School of Podcasting, a proud member. And
thank you.
And one of the things is you're always, doing website, tool reviews, all this new stuff that's coming out in podcasting. But what belongs on an episode page to help that interview gain legs? Like, talk a little bit about podcasting SEO, because sometimes it says, like I've heard, put the guest at the very, very beginning in your title of your podcast. No, put it at the end and tell what it's about, not the guest. Like, how do you do podcasting SEO for a interview-based show?
Yeah, so you definitely want the guest name in there, but if it's Dave Jackson, there's like 27 million of us. So if you don't know who I am, that's not going to really work. But you want people, if they search for that name, to find that. And then the other thing is people don't read. As much as we agonize over show notes, they're great. But if you just give them one giant wall of text, that's not going to work. They're just going to look at it and go, too long, didn't read. So this is where you want to break up things into headings and subheadings. And so those headings should be, here's how Lou got to see the new cruise ship in Germany, or something like, here's the benefit to the audience. Mm-hmm. And when I think about what just came out of my mouth, that was a benefit for Lou. But you want it like, here's how you can see the new cruise ship in Germany, or whatever. So you want those keywords in there, what you're looking for. There are tons of different, if you're on WordPress, there's tons of plugins for SEO. Most website tools have some sort of SEO tool. I know we have one in Podpage. But break it up, because what happens is people see this long page, and then at first, if it's just a giant wall, they'll just bounce. But if they'll skim the headings, and then when the headings tie them in, they'll actually go back and read that. And what happens then is the longer they're on your site, so definitely have a player there so that they'll click on that. And what happens then from the Google standpoint is, hey, every time we send something to Jeff's site, people are there for like 20 minutes. That must be really good. So by having it broken into chunks so that hopefully they'll read it, and then a player there so they'll hit play. Anything to keep them on the website, that boosts your time on site, which boosts your SEO, which makes Google happy. And then obviously you always want to have links to the guests. So links. I will send you a sternly worded letter if you get me all hot and bothered about the guest book, and I go to the show notes and there's no link to the book. A, you're missing affiliate income, and B, now I got to figure out how to spell their last name, and their last name was Schwarzenegger. And I'm like, how do you a sternly worded letter is coming to you if you don't have a link to the book.
Yeah.
Jeff, if I could say, in terms of titling episodes, I think sometimes it's better not to sort of be very explicit in terms of what it is, especially if your guest is not somebody that everybody knows. So instead of saying Jeff C. talks about designing the Haunted Mansion parlor, it's more intriguing to say Disney Imagineer shares secrets of designing the parlor. All of a sudden now there's a little bit of interest and intrigue, which is going to make me sort of go deeper and at least start listening.
So I also produce Guy Kawasaki's Remarkable People podcast, and he has big guests. But we found, like, if he has a Stanford professor, like, most people don't know Stanford professors.
Right.
It's a great show, but we have to do what you just said, like, break it up and, like, what is the show about? But if Martha Stewart's on the show or Seth Godin, you lead with that in the title, right? Like, so it depends on the guest, how famous they are, what your audience knows, and that kind of thing. So great stuff.
And keep in mind the title is the promise of your show. Nothing I hate more than seeing how to blank, 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 and they never talk about that subject, but AI said it would rank good, so that's why you used it. So keep that in mind.
So Tanya, you mentioned before you have kind of a process to help guests feel more comfortable. I was listening to NASA, their panel that was on before this and this morning, and they were talking about how a lot of times they'll have engineers and people like that who don't really feel comfortable in front of a microphone. And then camera, because you do a lot of live streaming, exclusively, that's even more. People get kind of wigged out. So how do you coach people or make them feel comfortable to get the best interview you can out of them if they're really uncomfortable turning on the camera?
Okay, so I'm going to be really transparent and say this. If you had caught me about 10 years ago, even less than that, I would have been the person that said, I never want to be on camera, ever, ever, ever. Put me behind the camera. In fact, I was that person who was doing videos without ever putting my face on it. I would do voiceovers on top of a slide. I even went so far as to hire somebody to create a caricature so that would be me, right? So I do get it. And I am an introvert, despite the fact that I'm up here with these wonderful gentlemen, very much an introvert. And so I'm a cave dweller. And when I say that, I'm saying that when I talk to clients and people who are uncomfortable and have that lack of, I won't even say it's a lack of confidence. Sometimes it's just they have this fear of being judged or whatever the reason might be. What I try to coach them to do is to look at it as a conversation with a single person. If you were just talking to one person, don't imagine that you have this audience of 10,000 people. Imagine that you're talking to one person that you're trying to help. And what would you say to them, and how would you speak to them in a way that is conversational, that feels good to you and makes them also understand what you're saying is basically beneficial to them. So that's the number one thing. And sometimes what they'll do is put a little picture, like we used to have magazines. We don't have those anymore, right? Nobody. But print out a picture. Do whatever you need to do, but put it right next to the lens. And look directly into the lens. Look into the center of the camera. Or take one of those sticky notes, the ones that have the arrow.
I used to do that too.
Yeah. I mean, I had to do those things myself to just build up that comfort level with having a conversation on camera, not let me try to perform. Mm-hmm. Instead of being the performative person, I'm the conversationalist.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good tips. Good tips. And I have a face for Photoshop. So... Lou, I wanted to ask, like, you've turned interviews into books. You have a live show that you do on Wednesday. You have big community events. Mm-hmm. So what signals do you see in an interview that says, okay, that's going to be a part of my book? Or that's, because you have, I think it's part 1 interviews you've taken from your show and you have a book about that. So what is it about an interview that makes the cut, that you want to repurpose it or put it out there different versus like ones that are like, okay, it was good for my audience, but I'm not going to push it out anymore?
So I think there's a couple of things. One, again, there has to be sort of value in the interview. And I've been very fortunate, for people that have come on But when I decided to sort of, we talk about repurposing, we think taking my audio, taking my video, and then repurposing it into a social clip or a blog post. I think that there is, if you are if somebody who does interviews, you do have the opportunity to take those interviews, take those transcripts, repurpose them into a physical book, which has a multitude of benefits. One, now you are a published author, and with that comes a certain degree of credibility. You're now potentially reaching an audience that is not a podcast consumer, but wants to hear those stories. So for me, my Disney Interviews book, Volume 1, was these are all people that I've interviewed that have worked for or with directly Walt Disney. So that's sort of the connective tissue between all of them. The next one might be, these are people who were or are current or former Walt Disney Imagineers. But think about that in terms of taking some of those interviews, getting those transcripts, adding contextually stories in front and behind those as well, going to something like lulu.com and being able to publish a book, which also has secondary and tertiary benefits for your guests as well, because now all of a sudden their stories are reaching other people. They're going to take that, they're going to reshare it with their audience as well. And again, I think there's this opportunity to not just have that credibility, and that I think books are the new business cards, but there's also some financial benefits as well.
Awesome. And Dave, you have a book as well. What's it called?
I do. It's called Profit from Your Podcast, Turning Your Listeners into a Livelihood. Available at profitfromyourpodcast.com.
So on that note, and you talked a little bit about, having some guests, and that you say at the very, very beginning, if it doesn't work out, like, I'm not going to publish it. This doesn't mean automatically. So what's your personal filter for deciding when someone is a fit? Like, I was lucky enough to be on your show. I don't know how that happened, but probably because you want me to join the School of Podcasting, which I did.
That was it.
Yeah, exactly. And
sly marketing thing.
So what do you look for in the perfect interview to have them come on your show?
Either, for me, what is everybody here for? Hey, how do I grow my podcast? So when I have somebody say, I did this and this is what happened, you're on the show, because my audience can do that. Or I want to inspire people to start a podcast. So like Lou has 50 million because of my podcast stories, and he was on my show 400 years ago. I'm like, I need to have Lou come back. And so because that inspires people, it's just, part of it is kind of weird if it resonates with me, because I am I'm in the same boat. I want to grow my show. And so those are probably the two biggies. And then I hang out in Reddit a lot. I hang out in Facebook groups. So I'm always looking to see what people are stuck on. And that will give me ideas for episodes as well.
So follow-up question, how do you gracefully decline when somebody is like, Dave, I want to be on your show. I'd be great. Like,
I go, well, great, thanks so much for reaching out. I really appreciate that. Could you help me connect the dots? What value are you going to be bringing to my audience? And many times they never answer that back, because I'm kind of like, okay, why do you want to be on my show? Here's who I'm talking to. What you got? I had somebody pitch me a plumber last week who doesn't have a podcast. And I'm like, yeah, that's a no. And so sometimes I just delete, but that's really, and I try to make it a conversation. Like, hey, here's my goal. I want to help these people grow their podcast. What you got? I want to inspire these people to want to start a podcast. What you got? Those are just two off the top of my head. And if they go, I got nothing, guess what? You're not coming on my show, but thank you so much. Is there anything I can help you with? Because the biggest benefit of an interview is not that I'm going to get their followers to like my show. It's the relationship that you get with those people. So make sure the last time you talk to your guest is not the last time you talk to your guest.
We have probably time for one question. If anybody's got a question in the audience for these folks, and like, direct your question to the person you'd like to answer it.
Okay, great chat, you guys. Great information. You're talking about the link, Dave, back to wherever it needed to go.
Yeah.
To a book, whatever. Well, we put in our show notes. I use Buzzsprout. That link can be embedded, and I know at Podpage it looks great. It's embedded. People can quickly click on it. But Apple, Spotify, they don't carry the links, or the other platforms.
They should. If it's in your show notes.
And it'll be in, because I always I don't just go to HTTP. I embed the link, and it comes through on all the other platforms.
That sounds fun.
If you're using Buzzsprout and you put the links to all the stuff that you want linked to, that will come into your pod page. It'll go into all the different apps. Now, not every app treats links the same, but if the link's there, it should work. And I always direct people back to my website because that's where all the magic happens.
So really quick as we end this session, Tanya, we'll start with you, where people can find you, and we'll just end that way.
Okay, you can find me at streamlikeaboss.tv. Streamlikeaboss.tv, and if you go to /links, you can find me wherever you prefer to play.
There you go.
Lou?
One last thing, interview with your audience first. Think about your audience first, not necessarily the person interviewing. You can find everything I do on the Disney side of things at wdwradio.com. I've been podcasting for so long, I had to put the word radio in the title. And everything I do in terms of helping other entrepreneurs and podcasters in my Momentum events, you can find at loumongello.com. And I'm at Lou Mongello on social.
Dave?
Yeah, you can find all things Podpage at podpage.com, and you can find the School of Podcasting at schoolofpodcasting.com.
And I'm Jeff C. at creatornewslive.com. Thank you guys so much for being at the session. We appreciate you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.